Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie Schneiderite, and Rutgers beat reporter, Craig Epstein. Guys, the regular season for Rutgers football has concluded. Rutgers had its final home game of the season on Saturday against Maryland, where they fell 42-24 to drop their fourth straight game. They went 0-4 in the month of November. I believe they were outscored something along the lines of 126-46. So it's been a month. It's been tough to watch, especially after that 6-2 start. I think we all expected a little bit more. I think we all expected at least one win in the final four games, but that never came. We've done a lot of talking about this game, both online, you did the post game. Craig, you've written a couple articles. Let's just talk high level. What was the I guess because it wasn't a whole lot of positives, what was the most disappointing aspect of this game for you, Craig?
I would just say the most disappointing aspect was just the way they came out. Because all year long, their defense has just been really rock solid. They've been so dependable, but just came out completely flat. Fell behind its early second quarter. It was 28-3, and by that, it's like you're basically like, okay, what else am I gonna do with my day? Because I mean, the game didn't end until what, 7:30? I mean, Jesus. I mean, it's a 3:30 kickoff, and the game doesn't end until 7:30. I don't get out of there till 9. It's like, come on, guys. But either way, I mean, yeah, it's just very disappointing with the defensive way to come out. And yeah, like we talked about all season long, this team is not built to really come back from really any kind of deficit, to be honest. And the fact that they fell behind 28-3 before you really got comfortable on your couch, the game was pretty much over. I mean, credit to them, they did mount a little bit of a comeback in that second quarter. And if they come out of halftime with the ball, you have a chance to make it a one possession game, believe it or not. But didn't happen, and Maryland pulled away, and that was it.
How about you, Rich?
Yeah. I mean, I thought we'd see significant progress from this offense, and it's only gotten worse all season long, to be honest with you. The running game's great. Kyle Monangai got his 100 yards, 100-plus yards again, and they just can't pass the ball for shit. And honestly, at the end of the day, I know people are trying to blame the offensive line somehow this week, which makes no sense to me. But you got to blame the quarterback at the end of the day. He's missing easy throws. And even like when he hits his targets, you got Dremel reaching on one and he's making diving catches. You got Isaiah Washington. They're finally taking deep shots, and it ended up working out really well the one play. Where was that all season long? Isaiah Washington was wide receiver, 2, I guess, technically all season long? 3, you want to argue? And they just didn't use him at all. And then all of a sudden they start using him, and look what happens. He has 3 for 67. And it's like, even like on the one call, is pass interference. So worst comes to worst, you're getting that pass interference call and moving down the field. You got to take some shots. But yeah, it was just honestly probably the worst game of Gavin's career, and it was just brutal to watch. And that was my biggest takeaway, is that you need quarterback help badly,
especially when you juxtapose Gavin's play against Talia. Like you couldn't be further of a gap between two college quarterbacks. The guy on the other side set the all-time record for Big Ten passing on Saturday. Mm-hmm. And it happened, I want to say, in like the second quarter, because he had almost 300 yards passing by halftime. He had like 298 or something like that. Like, and it wasn't like he was throwing these, frozen ropes that were between two defenders and just perfect ball placement. He had a couple throws like that, but the majority was just taking layups. It was hitting the guy in the screen and letting that play develop. It was, there's busted coverage down the field. I'm just going to loft this thing in there and get it to my guy. And that doesn't have to be, 10 yards over his head. I was really hoping for Gavin and the offensive coaching staff's sake that Gavin could parlay the Penn State game, which, despite the stats, if everybody who watched that game and didn't come away impressed with Gavin's performance, then I think you're just a hater. And I consider myself a light hater, but only because it's nothing against him. It's just he hasn't really played well this year. I was truly hoping that he could parlay that performance into another standout performance against Maryland. And immediately from the jump, you saw, oh man, here we go again. First throw of the game was that ball he sailed over Bowman's head. Yeah. He just sailed so many balls. It's funny because, like, no matter who you listen to on broadcast, whether it be the national guys in Matt Millen or Ross Tucker, or anybody who's done a Rutgers game, or you listen to our own guys on the radio, like, everybody sees that this quarterback we have is not doing the most basic, easy things that a quarterback needs to do. In my opinion, the primary goal of a quarterback is to complete a forward pass. Now, you can do that in many ways, but Gavin cannot consistently hit wide open receivers. And we've now had a sample size of almost 500 pass attempts in his career. He finished the season completing 47.8% of his passes. Now, that's bad. That's really, really bad.
Abysmal.
But to put it into perspective, so there was 115 quarterbacks in the FBS this year who had over 225 dropbacks. Gavin was the worst. He was 115th out of 115 in completion percentage at 47.8%. The second place guy, so the second worst player in that criteria in completion percentage, was 52.5%. So Gavin was almost 5 percentage points worse than any other quarterback who had 225 plus dropbacks. That is massive. That means he was 10% worse than the second worst guy in college football in terms of completing passes. And then you can say, well, he had a lot of throwaways, he had a lot of drops. Okay, let's look at adjusted completion percentage, which takes all that into account. Gavin's still the worst at 58.8% on the season. Only guy underneath 60% in the FBS. Second worst guy, 62.0. So he's almost 4 percentage points worse than the second worst guy there, too. So it's like, at some point, you just have to realize this isn't going to get substantially better enough to really justify tethering yourself to Gavin. I'm not saying you have to run him out of town, but this season was on the coach. This season was on Greg Schiano in terms of the offense, because he looked at his roster and he said, I do not need anyone else in the quarterback room because I have that much faith in Gavin Wimsatt. So I'm not going to go after a transfer quarterback. I can win with defense and running the ball. And sure, it worked out this year. But this recipe, and Craig, I thought that was a great question you asked him at the presser when he was talking about, how we've gotten dominated by Maryland so many times in a row underneath Greg Schiano. And he said, well, I think it might be because we get worn down and we always play them the last game of the year. Then you're like, well, is it because of the way you play that you're getting worn down, where you want to run the ball the entire game and then play like swarming smash mouth defense? And I think he said like he'd never thought about that, but he doesn't think it is, and blah, blah, blah. And then the other reason, he said, I think number 3 has a lot to do with it too. Oh, a superstar quarterback has a lot to do with why you're getting your ass kicked? Shocker. Never heard that before. Couldn't have come up with that analysis. Yeah, you need a good quarterback. Greg sees it. He says it in what he responds to the media with. He doesn't come out right and say, Gavin isn't the guy. But if you read between the lines of everything he said, between him talking about, we can't run, if we could run everything right now, we would. We're just not there yet. And he specifically mentioned screens. He specifically mentioned passing the ball a lot. Like, he's laid out all the breadcrumbs of how he really feels throughout all these pressers. You just have to go and read it. And this isn't some QAnon crap or something like that. And sorry for anybody who actually believed in that. But it's not like this coded message. You just have to like read what he says and then contextualize it. That's it. I know that was a long rant. I know we said we weren't going to go too deep on the game, but here I am. And we're 10 minutes into this.
No, I mean, you're spot on. How do you not get a transfer after everything that you've seen this year? And it doesn't. You said it before on the boards. You don't need a lot of money for a guy that's just accurate. You don't need much of anything. Just it needs to be accurate. We don't need a superstar that could throw it down the field every single play. You don't need a I can't say it. I'm done. But yeah, there you go. But you don't need a superstar like that. You don't need the Big Ten's all-time passing leader. You need a Tanner Morgan type that fits Kirk's offense to a T perfectly. I don't know, maybe a Hudson Card, who everyone had an argument. He sucks. He's not better than Gavin Wimsatt. No, bullshit. He is, clearly. Like, it's insane. Give me Brent. And I know Brandon Sorsby just entered, and I know people are joking and like, yeah, he's not that good. I'm like, no. All right, never mind.
I do not want Sorsby because it's not. He's not a substantial upgrade, in my opinion.
I'm not saying substantial, but I think he's an upgrade.
He'd be an upgrade, but that's like, I think we need to get somebody who's.
I think you need someone better than that, yes.
undoubtedly Power 5 average, and I don't think you really say that about Scoresby.
And you know what I hate to say? That the guy that they're probably going to look for, the type of guy they're going to probably look for in the transfer portal is probably sitting right behind Gavin right now. I mean,
how'd you do the bubble thing?
I don't know. That was weird. But
the ghosts in the computer agree with you, I guess, Craig.
Yeah, was that a thought bubble? I mean, geez, you don't want to see that. But yeah, the guy that they're going to look for in the transfer portal is probably pretty similar to Evan Simon, to be honest. The guy that's just accurate, can hit the open receiver. Not going to cost a lot of money. I mean, really. I mean, let's be honest, because I said this in the chat. If Rutgers was a 5-win team going into after the Iowa game, after that debacle, I think people would have been calling for Evan Simon to start those last 2 games, because can you tell me with full confidence that Gavin gave him the best chance to win those games? I mean, to be honest, I think there would have been a real debate there, and things would have been ugly if not for. I mean, really, I hate to look on the negative side, but if you take away the Wagner win or the miracle win against Michigan State, this season would have a very different story to it. So,
I mean, the Wagner win was always going to happen. I think you probably
right. I'm just saying,
if you take away the Michigan State win, which if you look at the win probability, Michigan State at one point had a 98.3% chance of winning that game in the second half. If you take away that game, which is probably a game you see once every decade as a Rutgers fan in terms of that kind of comeback, yeah, I think it is such a swinging door moment for the season, because then all that pressure, do you remember how happy Greg was after the Indiana game?
Yeah.
Talking about it's the best night's sleep he's had in years, and then last night again, I got a really great night's sleep. The weight of not making a bowl and not being a winning program was crushing Greg. If we don't get that miracle comeback at Michigan State, there is so much pressure over the final 4 games that we've talked about. And I agree. I think we would have had to make some tough choices. But look how many games down the stretch this year. If you talk about Iowa, you talk about Penn State, you talk about Maryland, that we just basically surrendered the fourth quarter. We didn't try and throw the ball. We ran the clock down on the play clock down to 1 or 2 seconds every single snap. They were just trying to get out of there. They weren't trying to win these games. They were happy and complicit at 6 wins because it secured them a bowl. They felt they had nothing to play for in these games at a certain point. So they stopped trying.
And I swear, I will die on this hill that I think if Rutgers just got competent quarterback play, they would have beaten the number 1 team in the nation. I swear, because there was a point where they had Ohio State right on the ropes. And we said it ourselves, they kept getting to the red zone, and they had to settle for field goals. If you score touchdowns, you probably beat Ohio State, and we're talking about probably the greatest win in Rutgers football history. But
no. I am 100% in agreement with you, Craig. That would have been, I think we would have beaten Wisconsin. I think we would have beaten Ohio State this year with above average to average quarterback play. Because if you look, we took 3 field goals within the Ohio State 5-yard line in the first half. That's 9 points. We threw a pick 6 coming out of halftime in the red zone of Ohio State. 7 points the other way. So that's a 7-point swing. Gavin Wimsatt misses a wide open Christian Dremel in the first quarter that Ross Tucker is probably still talking about on broadcasts. There is so many opportunities for easy points that we just totally squandered in that game. And then at some point, the defense wore down, and they scored a meaningless touchdown towards the end of the game to pad Marvin Harrison Jr.'s stats. It was a 19-point game, but in reality, anybody who watched that game knew it was a 1-score game basically all game. I think we were down by 7 points late in the fourth quarter. So I agree. I think we would have won that game. And people are saying, you can't say that, blah, blah, blah. Did you guys watch that game? Did you guys realize that, we were at the 2-yard line against Wisconsin, threw a pick 6 before halftime when we were getting the ball back and had momentum?
You want the biggest kick in the balls, and this is going back to Craig's Evan Simon theory, is now we can talk about it. During camp, during spring camp, during training camp, there was a notable, high school coaches are allowed to watch the entire practices because they're trusted. They know they're not going to go out and say anything. I had one very notable high school coach. I'm not going to reveal who it is, but told me multiple occasions where Evan Simon was the better looking quarterback in camp, especially multiple times in spring. And it's like, did they kind of
is...
just hand Gavin the job? Yeah, they did, basically. And I don't know if it's an NIL factor or if it's just Gavin's more, don't get me wrong, he's the better dual threat of the two, but it's just like, ugh.
This is not an isolated anecdote either. I had heard that from many different people, that Evan Simon looked better in camp than Gavin Wimsatt. And this is coming from people who would know. I'm not going to say much more than that. But I would keep hearing that. It would be like, hey, so-and-so ran into this person, and they were saying that Evan looked really good in camp, and Gavin was still pretty, hit or miss. And I said, oh, that's interesting. File that away. And then you hear the same thing a week later. It's like, okay, this is good to know. At least we have a confident backup. He already was named starter at this point. But to not even give him a chance, and the only time he does get a chance in Wisconsin, what happens? 3 plays, 30 yards, and a touchdown. So I'm not saying Evan Simon is some kind of savior, but for all the people who said that, like, we have to wait and let a guy improve out of one side of their mouth and say we've seen enough from Evan, he can't do it, he's not a Power 5 quarterback out of the other side. I just don't get, like, the mental gymnastics you have to go through to really make that make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest.
Both guys have their warts. Like, Evan Simon threw a ton of interceptions last year, put the ball in harm's way, but he also was able to, like, complete some pretty basic passing concepts. So I don't know. I feel like it's easier to coach out bad decisions than it is to coach out you can't make that throw. Sorry, Craig.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I probably would have said going into the season, I feel like Gavin has a higher ceiling than Simon. But he was given a full season. Like, he was given his chance, and like you said, you went through the laundry list of stats. Like, it's just horrible. Like, there's no other word to describe it. So, if Rutgers, I've said it before, but Rutgers at least has to give him some kind of competition going into next year, because if they're not, it's really just negligent. Because whether you want to go into the portal and find a quarterback, like you said, you don't have to go out and find Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. Just find a competent guy, or even give AJ Cerise a shot, because honestly, I know he's young. I know. But if you're telling me that AJ Cerise can't, like you said, Gavin during training camp wasn't exactly, laying it up. If AJ can't beat him out looking like that, I'll be a little concerned, to be honest.
Well, here, I wrote a post about this on the board. It's the quarterback conundrum now. So we have a month until the bowl. It's probably going to be pinstripe. It might be a different one, but regardless, we have about a month between now and when we're going to play the bowl. We get 15 practices, I think, for the bowl game, right? Right around there.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a great developmental time. Greg has said how important that is. Even more important than the bowl game itself is having those 15 practices. And it's a great recruiting tool, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like everybody's excited. Everyone's healing. It's kind of like a mini training camp. Now, the transfer portal opens next week. It's already open for FCS players. Bunch of really good players have already entered.
Grad transfers, all that.
Grad transfers. You have to evaluate your roster, prepare for next season while you're still preparing for this season. It's a very, very strange position to be in, because you've seen some offers go out already to defensive and offensive linemen. You need to make the decision fairly quickly. Are we going to go after a quarterback or not? Because if you wait until after the bowl game, the majority of the guys who entered will already have found a new home. And you can't put yourself in a position where you're just scraping the bottom. You have to do a honest look in the mirror. And then if you decide what most fans or most rational people would think after watching the season, that we probably should get somebody else for competition's sake at least, if not to come in and start next year, you have to start recruiting these guys like now. And you have to bring them to practices and recruit them while you're also kind of like trying to keep everyone else on the roster happy, like Gavin and Johnny and Evan Simon. Evan's probably going to leave, and that's not from any kind of inside scoop or anything like that, but just logically he's probably going to leave. How do you balance that? And is Schiano going to get to the point where he doesn't really care what consequences it has because he knows it's for the good of the team? Does that make sense? Like, it's a really awkward position to be in, but it's one that like you got to rip the Band-Aid off. You got to be the big boy in the situation. You got to be the dad.
Yeah.
You got to say, listen, I bought you this new car. You crashed it already. We're going to take the keys away from you. You can't be driving this anymore. That's what he's got to do. It sucks. It's unfortunate, but he's got to go out and recruit a quarterback at the same time of coaching Gavin and trying to get him better. I don't know how it's going to go over on the team or how it's going to go over with certain people, but that's just where we're at this point.
It's going to be interesting because, like, if you do go after a quarterback, like, can you imagine Gavin walking off the practice and, hey, who's that guy? You want to help recruit him? No, don't.
Yeah, he's a 24-year-old Walter Payton Award-winning quarterback from New Hampshire. He's good.
He's the next Johnny Langan. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. He's stopping by to say hi.
Yeah. Jeez. And there's some good ones in the portal too. Like there's some really good ones already. Like the New Hampshire kid Brosmer.
Max Brosmer. He led the FCS in passing this year.
The Holy Cross kid that you've mentioned multiple times in the portal.
Yep, he's arguably the best dual threat in the FCS. And you've seen a lot of guys like Max Rogers. I think his name is. Mm-hmm. We're not going to land him.
Will Rogers.
Will Rogers. I'm sorry. Will Rogers, the guy from Mississippi State. He's got like 12,000 career passing yards.
Max Johnson from A&M.
Yeah, like. Some of these guys, Rutgers is just not going to land. Like, they're not even going to stand a chance. But there's plenty of guys who we will have a chance with that we should probably reach out to.
No, I get the money and the starting thing, but you can't tell me with all the guys that are going to hit the portal, not one of them would like the opportunity of potentially starting for, basically a middle of the pack Big Ten team. I got to believe there's somebody out there that would jump at the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Crazy.
So we've kind of rambled here. I do want to talk about some season-long perspective things. Let's start with positives. I'll name one, then we can go around and I'll talk about positives, kind of like what we're thankful for. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. The biggest positive of this season by far, Rutgers made it to a bowl. It accomplished its primary objective of the season, which was making a bowl game. And you could see, like I said, from just the amount of relief Schiano felt in that post-game presser and that game week presser after we beat Indiana, how much that meant to him, how much, it was eating him up inside that they hadn't found a way to make a bowl in his first, I say they hadn't found a way, but they made the Gator Bowl in 2021. But again, that wasn't the traditional way you make a bowl. This was just such a huge... It's such a huge developmental point for the program because of those extra practices. You stack those up and you get basically like an extra year of training for every class if you make a bowl every year, because they're getting those. If the average senior went to a bowl every season, they'd have 60 additional practices that they've had while at Rutgers, which means they've had 60 extra practices to get coached up, learn new parts of the playbook, because you can't install additional portions of the playbook during the season. Maybe you can during the bye week, but most of the season is about individual game prep and maintenance, like staying healthy. You can't really even if they wanted to bolt on additional portions of Kirk Soraka's playbook, you can't really do it because it's too much to both prepare for a team and also to say, hey, we're going to run these 3 new concepts this game as well. You really need everybody to be on the same page. There's just not enough time in a week to kind of go through that. So you have the ability to beef up the playbook. And if you do that for 4 years straight, you're really going to have a whole team that has the playbook down pat. I know, didn't Kirk Soraka say it takes 3 years to get his playbook down?
Which is wild.
Wild. I don't believe that. I feel like that's a bit of coach speak, but still, say that is the case in the off chance it is.
Junior Gavin.
having these bowl game practices to help accelerate the learning of the playbook is huge. Rich, what is a positive that you took away from the season?
I got a couple actually, but I'm going to stick with just this one. I thought Harris Simiak's defense was just beautiful, and it kept him alive in so many games. Yep. The pass rush maybe not as much this year as it was last year, but overall the defense as a whole was just phenomenal. The secondary was great. The linebacker core, when fully healthy, was great. Even when they lost arguably their best player on defense, they still played pretty damn well. I think the unit as a whole was really good, especially the secondary. I can't rave about them enough. Longer Beams turned into basically a lockdown corner, mind you. Bad game recently, but all season long he's been pretty good. Max Melton kind of turned it around after a rough start to the year. Finished with 3 interceptions, probably going to NFL if I had to guess. And Flip Dixon, he was been a phenomenal transfer addition, and it goes to show you the transfer portal does work for you in your favor sometimes. But overall, that unit was just really good this year. It's a reason why they have 6 wins. It's a reason why they were competitive in most games. And I got to give a shout out to Harasimiak, who is going to be a head coach sooner rather than later.
Craig, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I mean, thankful, whatever you want to use, just team MVP for me has to be Kyle Monangai. I mean, the guy was just absolutely just a rock solid guy. He was their offense. He really was their offense all season long. And it's funny because before the season, me and Richie, we do our articles where we're talking about preseason expectations or answering questions from different writers. And you go through, and we went through we were talking about Samuel Brown after the freshman year he had, how excited we were to watch him, Gavin getting ready to potentially take the next step, those type of things. But as far as I know, nobody really mentioned Kyle Monangai. He didn't really have a great year last year, but he came out this year and just completely became a completely different running back. His vision, his strength, his motor, I mean, everything about him, he's turned himself into really an NFL type back. And now you're hearing the building towards possible NFL, whether it's a late round pick or an undrafted free agent. It's funny. I think the fact that that Pacheco's doing what he's doing right now in the NFL is probably going to help him, because he kind of runs, even though they're built, even though one's kind of, more tall and just different, they kind of run in a similar fashion. It's just very violent, very hard to take down. So I think that's going to help Pacheco's draft stock and obviously Greg Schiano's connections. So really credit to Kyle Monangai, man, because he was just so much fun to watch all season long. Like I said, he was basically their offense, because as we said throughout the season, if you shut down Kyle Monangai, Rutgers, their offense really is basically done. They really can't do anything else. But even through that, he still basically carried the offense to 6 wins, got them to bowl eligibility, and gives them potentially one more game to go. And we'll see if he ends up playing.
Yeah, Kyle Monangai, I've said it dozens of times this year. My favorite player on the team this year. Does everything at such a high effort level. He's not the fastest guy. He's he doesn't have the most wiggle, but his effort is unquestioned. The guy is willing to stick his face in the fan, regardless of whether it be, running a linebacker over on, short yardage situations, whether it be in pass blocking, whether it be in run blocking. How many times did a big run for Gavin Wimsatt get opened up because Kyle Monangai just absolutely murdered somebody right in front of him?
And that goes back to his draft stock, is that guys are going to look at tape. They're going to look at him basically putting linebackers basically on their ass, and be such a great pass blocker that I know one coach in this area that just loves nothing more than a passing running back. I'm not passing, a blocking running back. So I think that's only going to serve him well when it comes to drafts, the NFL draft season.
Yeah, I think without Monangai this year, there's no question we don't make a bowl. He probably won us 2 to 3 games on his own. He was that valuable to the team. And the combination of Harasimiak's elite defense and Kyle Monangai, who led the Big Ten in rushing, by the way, which is no small feat. If you kind of think about over the years how elite the Big Ten rushing leaders have been. Obviously, this was a bit of a down year, but that's still an incredible accomplishment and should be celebrated and should be remembered as one of the best seasons ever for a Rutgers skill position player. One of the things that I am also thankful for / biggest bright spots of the season, whatever we're calling this segment, we have a kicker. Jay Patel has been an absolute assassin this year. 29 to 30 from extra points, 14 to 16 in terms of field goals made, 87.5%. He's hit 2 or 3 from 50 plus. He's only missed, like I said, 2 field goals on the entire season. We have a kicker. It is locked in. We have a kicker now for the next 3 years that we can 100% rely on. It feels great because how many times in Schiano's 2.0 era especially have we had to forego a 42-yard field goal in a tight game because we had no faith in the kicker whatsoever? Jay Patel, he's gone through a lot since he's been to college too. The guy, like, I don't want to say he almost died, but he had a collapsed lung last year, and he couldn't train. He lost a lot of weight. He was in rough shape. Came back and just picked up right where he left off. He was a guy that, everybody was talking about as like one of the best kickers in the country, and he's right in Rutgers' backyard. And you can't say enough about this kid for how young he is to hit some of the kicks he did this year. Love the guy.
Kind of drives you nuts when they put out Jude McAtamney during the middle of a game, doesn't it?
I mean, Jude, if you want to talk about the kicking game in general, holy shit, Jude McAtamney on kickoffs. How many kickoffs got returned against Rutgers this year? Handful?
Not many, if any.
It is such a beautiful sight to see the thing sail out of the back of the end zone, or to see a guy catch it 6 yards deep and wave his arms. Because kickoff coverage has not been good for Rutgers, and it's such a high injury rate play in general. Because you got to think about it. You have 22 guys running full speed at one another and making contact at full speed. There's not many plays in football where you can say that, where everybody's making contact at full speed. So to get that basically out of the not out of the playbook, but to not have to have that play multiple times a game is such a huge injury risk relief in general.
I more so meant the guy's hitting 51-yarders. He's hitting 50-yarders this past weekend, and it's like, you know what? 53? Jude McAtamney. Let's go. What are we doing? Jay should be out there for every single kick. I don't care how far it is. Put him out there. The man's consistent. He's great. And he has some leg. He hit a 50-yarder, and there was still some room to work with after that. But, yeah, shout out to Jay. Big season.
Do you guys have any other things you thought needed to be highlighted positives-wise?
I thought offensive line took a big leap. I don't think we talk about it enough. Pat Flaherty, a hell of a job. Not shocking because he's a 40-year veteran. Legit 40 years of coaching, which is wild. NFL experience, college experience. It's going to be great to have him around. I don't know how much longer he'll stick around because of his age. I can't imagine he'll be here for more than like maybe 2 more years tops. That's just a guess. But hopefully you can keep him around as long as you can and keep developing that offensive line room.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the pressure numbers up for this year, but it's not like we had a huge personnel turnover, but consistently we're able to get the quarterback clean pockets, or at least enough time to make his reads. Whereas the last few years, it's basically been like, a paper tent at the snap. It's just everything is collapsed and they have no time. It's got to be a scramble drill. So I thought he did a phenomenal job in just, 9 months basically to turn this ragtag group from arguably the worst in the Big Ten to Big Ten average. And that's kind of what we're talking about with like the quarterback. We don't need to go from, worst to best. We need to go from worst to average, because you've seen that with the offensive line this year. What can happen when you have just average? You can be competent. You don't need to be an offensive juggernaut. You don't need to be Oregon. You don't need to be Washington, where you're slinging the ball all around the field. You just need to be average and competent. And that's what we've seen with the offensive line this year. And that's why, in big part, comment on guys leading the Big Ten in rushing. That's why, in big part, Gavin was one of the least pressured quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Great job by Flaherty. I think it was a great job in general by the offensive staff. I think we made a big stride offensively, and it goes to show what experienced coaches can provide to a team over green coaches, for lack of a better term.
And Richie, how many Giant fans right now are saying, "Bring back Flaherty"?
every single one.
At least one.
Our O-line coach is still employed. Jeez, it's yeah.
All right, so we've talked about what we're thankful for. Let's talk about some negatives for the season.
Oof.
We've talked a lot about Gavin, so I feel like we don't need to pile on more about the quarterback, but I do feel like we need to just like put a pin in saying you were hoping to find certainty long-term in the quarterback position. I don't feel like we found that this year. So that's probably the number one drawback of the season, was you don't really have your locked-in guy moving forward. Craig, what do you have as a negative moving out of the season?
I think just It's not that it's not, and I, like you said, I asked it. It's not that I dislike this offensive like style, because like I talked about even going into the season, like you don't care how you get the wins, you don't care how you get the points, as long as Rutgers wins and scores touchdowns at the end of the day, you're happy. But as we saw as the season wore on, is that this style in 2023, ground and pound and win it with your defense just does not. It's not sustainable. You see it with Rutgers, and you see it with the Jets. I mean, you'll get some wins. Maybe your ceiling is 6 wins, but at some point, the injuries are going to mount. You're going to hit November. The weather's going to get cold, guys. It just happens every time. So that's why when you get hit November and we saw them injuries start to pile up, they can't beat teams like Iowa, Ohio State, now Maryland, because Maryland, and again, like you said, Greg mentioned in the post game press conference, he's talked about how Maryland seemed to be a lot healthier than them. Well, let's think about this for a second. Maryland, a team that runs a very more of a high, powered offense, they just pass the ball more. So they don't run like this. It's a completely different style. So just put 2 and 2 together. There's a reason Maryland comes into the last game of the season basically not like an infirmary. This is the way football operates now. So I get it. I agree with them. This is the way the team was built to win this year. I'm fine with that. They got their 6 wins, so everybody is happy. They're going to probably the Pinstripe Bowl, so everybody can at least chill a little bit when it comes to that. But going forward, we're gonna have to start to kind of bring the offense now into the modern day football. I mean, you're gonna have to start passing more. You just cannot play this style year in and year out, because really they're going to be playing with fire next year, because we talked about it. 6 wins was basically, I'd say, going into the year, 6 wins was basically the ceiling. Next year, I think 6, as things stand right now, 6 wins is the floor. They got to get 6 wins next year, if not more, because like we've talked about, the divisions are gone. You don't got to worry about now facing Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, these powerhouses every year. Now you're going to get to face more Big Ten West teams, Minnesota, Illinois. I mean, whoever it may be. So really now it's just about, do you have what it takes to get into November, get into the late season and beat those teams? Because if you don't, this is going to be a very different story next year, in my opinion.
I mean, pretty spot on. I'm going to go with the pass rush. It kind of disappointed me quite a bit this year. Especially after last year where you're putting up crazy big numbers, and you can make a bunch of different reasons for why this happened. Maybe Marquise Watson not being with the team, maybe different interior pass rushers, because Ifeanyi Maijeh put up some really good numbers last year, and that hasn't been replaced at all in the interior. Isaiah Aiton did come in. He did play decent. But if you look at his numbers, he really didn't play that many snaps compared to the rest of the defensive linemen, which for whatever reason, it is what it is. Keontae Hamilton continues to be at best. I don't think he's really done much at all. But overall, like if you look at like the QB hurries, the QB hits, and obviously sack numbers are still down, but it's just like a significant drop between Wesley Bailey and Aaron Lewis, who are supposed to be 2 of the best edge rushers in the conference this year. Aaron Lewis specifically, like, just took a big drop. I don't know if teams are just keying in on more and they just notice, like, hey, that's the guy we got to stop. No shit, like just stop him and then we're good. And for the most part, that's worked. And they haven't been able to find consistency on the interior. I know Maya Nahanatu's missed some games, and that's been a struggle. But there's not really, for a team that Greg always says is like 10, 12 deep or whatever. I don't know if you really are 10, 12 deep, because Kenny Fletcher regressed. He barely even plays now. So like it's been a little bit of a lackluster performance from that pass rush.
Yeah, I would just go to highlight overall depth too, because you saw what happened. This isn't a surprise to any Rutgers fans, but as soon as a starter would go down, the massive hole it would create in a team. And you talk about a guy like Tyreen Powell, who was one of the best players on the team, gets hurt. And then look at what happens the next few games. We get gashed on a long pass against Iowa. We get gashed for a few long passes against Maryland in terms of tight end usage. Penn State has 2 really good tight ends that were doing kind of whatever they wanted at points in that game. So the depth still is not there. And that really kind of got exposed down the stretch, which kind of makes you think, like, do we need to find a different strategy if we know we're going to be playing shorthanded? And it's tough to balance all these different variables. Sometimes you just kind of need to go up with like a YOLO strategy where it's like, well, this is the best plan. We just got to hope for health. Like that might be how Shiano was playing it this year. But I think moving forward, I agree that it's not sustainable with the level of depth Rutgers currently has to play like we do consistently. What else? Is there any other negatives you guys really wanted to highlight?
Wide receiver core stinks, but that's
skill position. Yeah, skill position outside of Kawabunga was really kind of lackluster this year.
Very.
Stinks that Brantley never got the blood.
The NCAA fucked them on 2 people. So
yeah,
that.
I mean, in fairness, we've talked about this. If you look at Brantley's participation through his however many years he's played in college football, it did not look like he had a year of eligibility available to him. Now, I know that there was a talk that there was a holdup with his old school. I don't know what it was. We were talking about this beforehand. My speculation, and again, speculation, was that he was improperly marked as a participant for a game, either in 2018 when he was a freshman, because he played 2 seasons where he played 5 games, and the cutoff's 4. My theory was that somebody at Rutgers watched every single game those 2 years and found a game where he didn't play at all. And they were petitioning the NCAA to say, watch this game. You need to check it out because he didn't enter the field. He never actually played. And the NCAA said, well, that's an issue with that school. You got to go through them. And that school was not really willing to play ball or didn't really care enough to go through and watch and submit some kind of petition. Again, speculation on my part. But they keep talking about an issue at his old school, and it's showing that he played 5 games in both those seasons, which would count as a year of used eligibility, and then he has 3 other years, including the COVID year. So didn't look like he had any eligibility left, so shouldn't have been a shocker that he wasn't given a waiver because he didn't have eligibility.
Yeah. And you really think that NCAA is going to go all the way back and do that? They're probably just they said 5 games back in 2018, and you just found out now?
Again, speculation on my part. I don't know if that's the case or not, but if you just look at the participation chart, he has no eligibility. So I don't know what was even the reason to bring a kid like that on.
The Bo Mascow thing's just very weird, too. I mean, it has to be academics, if I had to guess. That's a pure guess, again, but it makes sense why a lot of schools backed off on him late. So, I don't know.
So let's talk about some predictions on who we think stays and who we think goes from this class or from this team moving into next year.
I'm going to name them off, and you guys just offer your opinions?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's start with a superstar, Evan Simon.
Man. Yeah, he's probably going.
I think he's down.
Yeah, I think it's all in agreement.
He's going to go somewhere, play well, and then everybody's going to go, see, why couldn't he play? Why couldn't he play?
It's like Cole Schneider 2.0.
Yep.
They're just going to move on from that one. Kyle Monangai.
Yeah.
He's gone.
Yeah, I think he's gone. And I was thinking about this, even if he doesn't go to the NFL, somebody would give him the bag. Rutgers, if he hit the portal, Rutgers wouldn't be able to. I don't think Rutgers would be able to even afford him. So, yeah, he's getting the bag one way or the other.
He's loyal though.
I know, but I think he gets such a bag that he would. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's very loyal. Yeah, it's not supposed to be some type of dig at him. It's just he would get such a bag that I think it would be almost impossible to ignore.
True. Tricky one here. Aaron Young.
I think he stays.
Yeah, I'm thinking he stays.
I don't think he's really an NFL level player. I think he can get a little money in NIL. I think he stays in college. Let's say that much.
Well, yeah, that was my question. Does he stay at Rutgers or does he enter the portal? Because he does have 1 year left. He did prove a little worth this season at times as a pass catcher, especially.
Probably, yeah. I'm thinking he probably hits the portal, honestly, because he basically became a third down, back. I think he probably wants to go somewhere and be potentially a starter, to be honest.
Sure. Christian Dremel.
I think he stays.
I think he stays.
Yeah, I think so too. Now here's an interesting one. Chris Long.
I mean, we had heard rumblings of him not being happy before he got ruled out with an injury for the year.
Yeah.
So that would not surprise me at all if he ended up leaving.
All right, that's an intriguing one. No tight ends really because they're out of eligibility. Other two are sophomores, so it doesn't matter. I don't think. Mike Chifani, he already transferred twice.
I have no read on that situation whatsoever.
Yeah, he already transferred twice. I just can't see him leaving the third time.
Yeah, I'll say he stays.
Brian Felter played himself into a nice little spot there. Well, is it enough to maybe say, hey, maybe I'll go somewhere else?
I mean,
I don't know. I think he could stay because he could probably, like you said, he had a good year. He could compete for a starting job. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. Given what offensive linemen fetch on the portal market,
that's true.
I don't think he's going to have a huge market, but I don't know. I could see him testing the waters because he's probably going to be a grad transfer at this point. So
you would think probably, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, probably. Holland Pierce. Some options there.
I think he should stay another year.
Mm-hmm.
Does he stay another year is a different question. I think I'm leaning yes, but that one's tough.
Yeah, I kind of feel the way you feel about Giovanni. I could see him testing the waters and seeing what he gets out there on the market.
Former transfer, Aaron Lewis.
I'm thinking he didn't have a great year, so I could see him honestly staying and trying to boost his draft stock again. That's just
who'd you say? Opinion. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Aaron Lewis.
I think he stays.
Weird scenario.
But he will be one of the more sought after players in terms of the poaching market on the Rutgers roster.
Mm-hmm. I just don't know if he would leave the portal again or go to the portal again. I think the other issue, you have to weigh the risk reward. Like if you have another shitty season, you're completely out of draft stock. If you have a good season, you're back in draft talk. If you leave now, you might get drafted based off potential alone.
Well, if you think about it, like he would probably be an undrafted free agent. You think, right?
Right now,
it's like what right now. So
seventh round picks are weird.
That's
what they do it all on potential, and they might be like, "Hey, look at this kid; he's got potential."
So, what really, if he came back, what much does he really have to lose? I mean, like you say, yes, he could play his way out of it entirely, but again, it's Greg Schiano. He's got the connections that if he really, if he has even if he has that kind of so-so season, he could probably swing a training camp deal somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
I just also think he's not a dynamic pass rusher. So I think he's probably playing a little bit out of position in college. I think he's probably more well suited for an interior role or as like a 3-4 defensive end.
Yeah.
But also you think about it, where's the money? Like defense, you want to be defensive
edge. Yeah. This is kind of a weird one, and it's not NFL talk, and I just kind of ranted on him a bit, but Keontae Hamilton.
Yeah.
I think he stays.
I'm kind of thinking he stays too, because he again, one of those guys who just trying to get into that NFL, and like that's a thing about, again, I keep saying it, like Greg Schiano, he's got the connections that can get you those training camp, invites that I think that's why some of these guys like a Keontae Hamilton stay.
Yeah. Other junior at defensive tackle, Troy Rainey. He's been here 3 years now.
I could see him leaving. He hasn't really gotten a lot of playing time. He's gotten recruited over multiple times by transfer portal guys.
That's true. Big name, big decision. Tyreen Powell.
I think he goes. I think
this is tough. I think he comes back only because of the injury. If he would have finished out the season, he probably would have decided to leave. And maybe I'm wrong here, but if he's not going to be able to work out at all, given his wrist injury or his hand injury, whatever they're calling it, and that extends into the time where he's got to be training for the NFL draft, I just don't see it. I think he's, in my opinion, probably best served coming back.
Yeah, no, tend to agree on that one. Mohamed Toure.
I think he's gone. I think he's he's already kind of been saying things on social media that kind of lean you to think he's probably leaving. But yeah, I think he's been in college now for 5 years, something like that. He's already dealt with an injury, came back this year, and looked like he hadn't lost any of his burst. I don't think you want to risk getting injured again at his age.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think he also showed some real position versatility this year.
Absolutely.
Do you think he gets drafted, or do you think just undrafted free agent?
Probably undrafted.
I think as long as his medicals come back clean, he'll get drafted, but it won't be, a 3rd round pick. It'll probably be like a 6th or 7th round pick.
Yeah.
But if they look at his medicals and go, oh, holy crap, then probably won't draft.
Yeah. Robert Longerbeam technically finished his junior year, so he is draft eligible. Could be portal eligible.
I think he stays.
I'm kind of leaning towards he goes, to be honest. I just feel like I don't know how much. Do you think he can really raise his stock that much more? I thought he had a really good year. I mean, until he actually, I thought I mentioned it during the Ohio State game. I thought he did a real good job covering Marvin Harrison Jr. until really till it was, I guess you could say, winning time. But up to like a certain point, Marvin Harrison only had like 2 catches. Like I thought he did a real good job. So I think he has skills that will translate to the next level. So I'm kind of thinking he goes.
It's a tough one because his height probably plays a factor in his draft stock, but like you said, he had a really good year. If he comes back, plays CB1, could have a really, really good year and improve his draft stock a little more. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Max Melton.
I think he's gone.
Yeah,
like at this point, if he stays, like then it's just like, like what are you doing?
I think we're all in agreement on that one, especially because he kind of improves his draft stock later in the season after some nice balls, nice interceptions, I guess. Especially yesterday. Yesterday was a beautiful pick. Eric Rogers.
I think he stays.
Yeah, another year makes sense, especially as a DB under Shiano. There's really no reason to leave, and he would be CB1 if both of those guys left, which is a little concerning, but that's why I think they'll probably hit the portal for that. But Flip Dixon, weird scenario.
This is probably the toughest one on the whole team.
Yeah,
I think if he did leave, he would be a draftable player. Now,
I could see him as an undrafted free agent.
I think at points he was the best player on the team on defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of oscillated between him and Tyreen Powell throughout the year. So 1A, 1B, kind of choose who you think's better. There were like games. Do you remember there were games where he would like take over a quarter? He'd get an interception, he would get a tackle for loss, he would force a fumble. Mm-hmm. This is all in like this really confined space. He can take over a game as a defender, which is not really something you can say about many safeties. He did have some bad moments too. Thinking specifically of that wide open touchdown in the Indiana game to Cooper. But it was overwhelmingly more good than bad. So I don't know how much more he could raise his stock right now, especially given I think he's in his 5th year, if I had to guess.
That's a good question.
He's been in college at least 4 years, is the point.
I know that.
If I had to make a guess, I would say he goes to the NFL.
Yeah, this is his 4th year of college. Yeah, that's a tough one. He's had such a good year. I don't know how much more he can really improve his stock. Like that's maxed.
The only thing is, I could see the NFL kind of looking at him and seeing him as kind of that tweener safety, where it's like you're kind of like, I think he actually did pretty good in coverage this year, but he's kind of like a bigger type of like safety type of guy. So they're gonna say, are you like a Jamal Adams type? Are you a guy that's gonna rush the passer, or are you gonna be actually like a cover safety, which he can do? I think he can do a little bit of both, but that's also a little bit of the problem, is that he's kind of hits that tweener mold. So that's kind of how I see it.
There's 2 more DBs that are technically draft eligible. Shaquan Loyal. Start with that one.
He's returning, I think.
Yeah, I think he's coming back.
And then Desmond Igbinosun.
I think he comes back, yeah.
All right, fair enough. And that's it. That's all of them. That's all 18.
Yeah, I mean, I think this 19, year will 17. Be a much different script portal-wise for Rutgers than last. I think last year, Rutgers was very fortunate that they were able to keep all the guys that they wanted to keep from leaving the roster. not for lack of trying by other schools. There were several players who were tampered with last year. I could think two off the top of my head were Sam Brown and Aaron Lewis.
Tampering? You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that, but it happened. And they weren't the only ones, but those are the two most prominent ones. And this is kind of one of the pitfalls of success, is that when you're successful, people notice, and your success is because of standout players. And we have quite a few of those on defense, especially. So I think we will have to fight twice as hard on defense to keep our players this year than last. But flip side of that coin is we'll be a more attractive landing spot for a lot of players as well. So I do think Rutgers has a lot more to sell going into the portal this year than basically any time that portal's been in existence. So I do think we'll have more high-level players interested in Rutgers than we did in the past. But it's a new set of challenges for sure for Rutgers this offseason than the last. For sure.
Yeah, and also that's why look at next season and we say, oh wow, this season that schedule looks favorable. This could be a potentially 8-win team, but I just think Rutgers can't look at, like we talked about. I think there's going to be a lot of high-end guys who are not going to return. I mean, Kyle Monungai just probably the biggest one of them all. That they have to go. They can't. I just think they can't look at look at their roster and be like, yeah, we're good. No, you got to hit the transfer. I think they got to hit the transfer portal pretty damn hard, and that's and in my opinion, that's going to include finding a quarterback, because again, it just all circles back to the quarterback and Gavin. That if you roll into next year with Gavin as a quarterback and he shows you this, you're just really playing with fire, and you could. I'd hate to think that a schedule that looks really favorable for Rutgers ends up not being as favorable as we thought, and we're sitting here next year talking about what could have been.
Yeah, you need to hit the portal, and you need to hit the portal hard, and you need to also retain people. It's going to be interesting. And Mike said at the beginning of the pod, I don't know how you do it when you're going to have to recruit while you're getting ready for a bowl game. It's going to be awkward because you're going to see some guys that are going to be like, hey, like, isn't that like the top corner in the portal? What the fuck? Like, I thought I was CB1 next year, and it's like, hear me out. Hear me out, Eric. And gotta have a talk.
Like, college football in 2023.
Yeah, that's just, it's so awkward because the way the portal window is, like, you kind of, I mean, I guess obviously you can recruit these guys post the portal window, but these guys are entering the portal almost ready to make a decision like now. So it's like, hey, you're going to be CB2 for the bowl game, but you're also going to be CB3 next year. Sorry. But, like, and the quarterback scenario is the worst one, because how do you tell, like, hey, Gavin, I know you're going to start the bowl game, but this guy's your competition next year. He also just threw for, like, 3,000 yards at FCS, so congrats. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be weird, but you have to do it. That's how it works.
Yeah. No, it's not easy. This is big-time football, and this is the kind of problems you want to have, because that means things are going right. You don't want to, you don't want to have these problems where you're just trying to fill a roster. We're trying to improve a roster now, which is a good sign for sure. In terms of football, that's all I got. I think we spent close to an hour talking about that. Rutgers does have a basketball game tonight against StPeters. StPeters is currently 1-3 on the season. They're ranked in the 290s on Bart Torvik. I think they're in the 260s in terms of KenPom.
They made the Elite Eight last year, by the way.
That was not last year.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Listen, time makes no sense.
Yeah, flat circle, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, everybody knows StPeters from that Elite Eight run, but that was 2 years ago. This is a game that Rutgers should dominate. They're 14 or 15-point favorites, depending on the book you're looking at. And there were some rumblings on Twitter from a lot of different people that we might see a long-awaited familiar face on the court tonight in Mawat Mag.
Ooh.
So stay tuned for that, because we could see the guy we've been waiting to come back for a while, and it would make sense to get him in a game against an inferior opponent for a big-time matchup against Illinois on December 2nd. I was about to say Shiano, but Peichel has said anytime he's been asked really about Mawat Mag, it was that it's all about his comfort level, and nobody's going to rush him back onto the court, and it's just about when he is ready to come back. To me, that signals he has been cleared by the medical staff, and he's talked about how his recovery has gone ahead of schedule all off season. And Richie, you could attest that it's very anxiety inducing coming back and playing a sport after you've injured your knee. Did you tear your ACL playing basketball?
I did both during basketball.
So
one and then
I imagine you talk about this better than most, about how weird it must be, doing those same movements that hurt your knee the first time.
It's scary because like your first jump, you're like, oh my God, I landed perfectly. All right, I'm good. I think I'm okay. And then like the next one, you might not even like do anything to it, but you just get like nervous again, and then like you might tweak something else like a little bit and be like, okay, wait a second, is that okay? I don't know. Like, and you freak out. Like it's nerve-wracking.
To talk about what it feels like, though, we don't do a whole segment on this, but like, you do the recovery, and obviously that's painful and it sucks and whatever. But what does your knee actually feel like? What is the difference in terms of just sensation when you're, doing athletic things with a new ligament in your knee than when you previously had it?
Yeah, I don't have the same training staff that they have,
sure.
Obviously. So it's weird. Like it feels like there's a lot of tension on your knee, and it's just very tight muscles and stuff. And like it's honestly just when you first jump, like you're like, holy shit. I used to be able to, like, for me personally, I was in high school, so I had like the peak of my athleticism. I used to be able to,
he would have played basketball.
I would have been D1. Yeah.
First team all state.
Rutgers, Newark, maybe Rutgers, Camden, whatever the D3 one is. But yeah, no, like I used to be able to dunk a tennis ball, and then I go to jump, and I'm like, yo, I think I can touch net. Like, and it's crazy. Now I can almost touch rim again, but it's hard. Like you have to build it back, and now I'm talking 6 years, 7 years later. Actually, it might be longer than that. It's been like 10 years, Jesus. But yeah, no, it's like a sketchy feeling because you don't know if your knee's gonna hold up when you land. And personally, mine was landing on someone's foot, and my entire knee popped out. And when my knee popped out, it drags the muscles with it, and or ligaments with it, and that's kind of what happened. And then the second one, I did the same thing, but I was an idiot and tried to pop my knee back in by myself, and my kneecap cracked in half. So I have 2 screws in that one, so that's pretty fun. And I still play basketball though. So I'm like any other hooper out there. I love the game.
It's just a flesh wound.
Dude, I going home after that.
Some fucking Lethal Weapon shit from Richie.
Wild. It's sorry. But yeah, no, it is a sketchy feeling. Everything's just tighter. Like it's just like a tight muscle around your knee, and it's like almost like you have like one of those restriction bands that, like, you ever see those like jumping techniques that they have like that waistband that's like on your ankle and on your waist?
Yep.
It's like one of those is just like permanently on your leg, and it's like, whoa, like I need to get like back into the movements and stuff. So if he does play, I don't expect him to go crazy, especially with the way he plays. He's super aggressive, super defensive. I don't think he's going to be the same Watt Mag to start, but I do think he can get back to that by probably mid-season or around there.
Yeah, it's just a lot of intensity he plays with that.
That's why it's a little tougher for him, I feel like.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, we really appreciate you joining us. We've gone through a lot today. We've made it through football season. It was a standout year for a lot of different reasons. Overall, good year. Some complaints, more good things than bad. I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way. But we also have dealt with a month straight of losing, and so it's tough to stay positive in those moments. But going back and kind of being retrospective about things definitely helps. And I want to thank everybody who's liked and subscribed and who's donated during our live shows. You guys are awesome. We really appreciate each and every one of you. We don't take any of you for granted. So for all of you who are listening, if this is your first time listening, or if this is the 231st, for me and Richie and Craig, this has been another edition of the Net Report Podcast, signing off.